Hello and welcome to another episode of Kyle Woods Outdoors. Today I'm tying a copper john, just like the fly I fished in the creek chub and brook trout video. So we got our orange tungsten bead on a number 10 hook. Get that in the vise. This hook is a size 1260, size 10 hook by Daiichi. And for the bead, I have Cyclops beads by Wapsi, and they're blaze orange. It's pretty easy. They're good for size 10 up to size 14, but today I'm using a size 10 hook. And I have a really heavy strength denier thread. It doesn't matter. It's not like it's a very delicate thing. But first, we're going to throw a little bit of weight on our fly here, and it doesn't need to be a serious diameter. I would say a .015 would be in the good ballpark range. If you have 20 or .02, I should say, or .025, that should work. Even size 30 or .030 would be alright. But I don't know. Sometimes this fly gets really thick really quickly. But who knows? Maybe you're fishing really deep holes and you're building this fly for a particular pocket that you're thinking about. I often sometimes do that where I design a particular fly for a certain creek because the caddis are a little bigger there, or they're a certain shade darker than the stream next door. But anyway, we just want to make a nice little tapered body. You don't want to go all the way back, but you definitely want to go all the way forward, and then a couple of turns over the top of that. We need to just go ahead and start our thread right behind the bead of the hook. Of course, I've made a bit of a fouling. You want to get this seated on the hook, not on the lead or the bead. If that happens, the fly is going to turn, and it doesn't matter the amount of super glue you spread over the top of everything. If it isn't seated and it isn't anchored, it just isn't really going to work. And if you want to be extra practical or give yourself better assurances, you can always add a little bit of super glue. I like this Dollar Tree gel. It just sets up nice and slow, even though sometimes I still get it all over the tips of my fingers. I prefer this stuff over super runny other brands. Well, I mean, I just think it's cheap from the Dollar Tree. You know, it's like, what, $1.25, and you get two of them. Super glue is kind of super glue. A trick to if your super glue ever seizes up on you and you can't get the cap off, a little acetone helps melt that back down and make it pliable. So otherwise that would be nail polish remover in layman's terms. It's kind of a cool trick to anyone who uses a bunch of super glue in their flies or models or things around the house. Anyway, we've covered this now with thread. We're good. we just want to keep that from spinning on us too terribly. The next step would be to add ourselves a couple little tail fibers. I'm going to stick with a green hackle color. This is kind of something I have close to me, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. We want to just take a couple of pieces off of the side, like so, and just yank that out. Now, we're going to gather the roots. So our tips are facing out. And I'm going to give this a twist so that all of the fibers aren't pointed in the same direction. They're all sort of splayed out. And capture those tips in. Then I'm going to work my thread over the top down to where all these fibers will seat against the hook. Not against the lead, not against our thread. We're going to go against the hook. We're going to go a pass underneath just to sort of give them some support, and you'll see them all sort of flail up rather than going with the curve of the hook there. And so we'll bring our thread all the way up and forward, making sure our taper is still a taper. Sometimes you put too many wraps over these fibers on the backside, and your fly looks now cattywampus because your tail or your butt area looks extra big. I could make a joke about that. I'm not, I'm not going to. The joke came too late, and I don't know if it's really good. Haven't ran it by anybody. All right. I just took my wire. I'm using a chartreuse copper wire. It's a small diameter. It's not wire from the craft store. This is I don't know who made it. I lost the bobbin a long time ago, so I really couldn't give you the details, but I know it's the small. If you're in the fly tying section at whatever store or shop you are in, it's the small diameter. Got tangled. Needed to, I guess I didn't really need to get it untangled, but it would be nice. So, just coming back up with our thread, we're going to come up to where we're about right behind the eye hook, because now we're going to take our wire and spin it in here and give ourselves some cool, flashy body segments. Now, I like to make these as close as possible, if not touching. However, I know the first few wraps by the bend of the hook sometimes can get a little dicey to try and make them touch on both sides. You just want to make a nice shiny area with this wire. It's going to look like nice body segments of nymph that sort of looks like a mayfly. But the fact about it is the copper john really doesn't look exactly like any sort of pupa of of any sort of bug. It sort of resembles most of them, if not all of them. You know, at a quick glance, you don't really know which one it is, but it has many of the same characteristics as other nymphs, and so if you're stripping it through the water fast enough, the fish are willing to take the chance to bite on it. It's a fun fly to fish. It's extra heavy. It gets down in those pockets and those deeper lakes that you might be fishing. It's one of my favorites. One of the first flies I started tying that I really had great success with. So, and it's relatively easy too. I mean, there is a lot of materials, but the concepts are easy enough. It's not Wally wings or anything too finger dexterous. So I'm just doing a little secure deal. We're up in our thorax area, so if this gets a little thick with the wraps, that's okay. We're gonna make it a little beefier anyway with some peacock curl and some thin skin and more of that hackle. I just went up and back, and so I would have a nice secure point for the wire, just to really twist and tug and pull it out. I know some people clip them, but I think it's like a waste of your scissors, or you're going to have to sharpen your scissors one day so you can cut wire instead of just helicoptering it out. Anyway, we'll go back to on top of our copper here, because we did a few wraps too many, but that's okay. It's better to have it all the way up than have a gap there. So if materials overlap a little bit, oh well, that's okay. We'll get over it. Alright, all of this papery stuff, I don't like it. We're going to go root end down. We're not going to use all this. Sometimes the tips are weak and the things break, and it's not great. So now that we have that in, we come back over the top and sort of try and capture it in a place where it's like hanging down like so, just so it's out of the way. I don't like having everything on top when you try and do this technical next step, because this is the hard part about the fly. I mean, if there is a hard part, I don't think it's too terribly difficult, but I've seen some people struggle sometimes. So I'm just gonna cut like an even amount to how thick my fly is off of a piece of thin skin. This happens to be the olive polka dot pattern. I think it works out pretty nicely. We're going to tie this in and fold it over like any other wing casing. But before we put that in, we need to make a piece of flash. It will sort of look like, you know, the muscles of the wing case separation point. I know I'm not saying this right, but like, if you were to be a bodybuilder and you had huge pectoral muscles, there would be a line down the center of them. And that's what this piece of flash is going to represent, is the separation between each wing muscle when it is an adult. I mean, it starts developing this stuff in the nymph stage, and definitely has it in the pupa. Not all of the bugs have the same stages. Um, Mayflies actually have two adult stages where I won't bore you with the details because you're here for this fly, but they come up top to be able to fly at once, and then they get into their fully formed adult mating body, I guess. They call it the spinner. Right, the main thing is it's a big awkward square, so I twisted it into place a bit. Angling it into the side in which I'm capturing the material from, it always sort of sets it up a little bit better. Maybe it's a little crooked, but we can always sort of tug on it and go back over the top and adjust it a little bit the opposite way. But now that that is done, onto our legs. So you can use a little bit of hackle. It'll be so what I've done is I've sort of taken the hackle and I've not exactly stripped it, but I've moved some of the feathers back. I'm going to tie in right at that breakaway point in between where all my biots flare out. I'm going to fold this back over the top. Tie it off and move my good hackle forward, come back here, trim all that tip stuff away. We don't need it. Make sure everything's centered the way you would like it, and then come forward. We are going to trim away any loose fibers now. That's looking good. So, with our thread all the way up at the bead and our peacock curl starting at the back end, we're just going to start making wraps forward with the peacock curl, trying to keep them closely spaced so that this peacock curl makes nice fluffy gills for us. Alright, I've captured it going forward, then once backwards. I'm going to just trim away any extras that I have. Now we're going to seat our legs over the top. This will just be that hackle feather. And I'm just sort of cleaning this up. I don't want these fibers in here that will sit on top of the bead. I just want the legs to be in this area in between where they started and the bead. I've really cleaned this up. Like so. And now I will capture that with my thread. A few wraps, and then come and fold it back, capture it with a few more wraps, and then trim the rest of my hackle feather away. Now you should have pretty even legs. I mean, they are going all over the place, but hey, they're even and they're in here. And then you'll fold your thin skin up over the top to make a nice wing sort of thorax casing for all of the legs to stick out of. And in this step, I'm going to just add a drop of super glue to the underside of that thin skin. I think it just sets up and makes it a lot better of a fly in the long run. These things become way more durable with that little bead of super glue. And then finally, we're going to lay down that piece of tinsel or that piece of flash, whatever you're using. It could be either or, but you can see how it's just straight down the center. We've made a nice separation in our wing case, and looks like the muscles, the whole muscle spiel I was talking about earlier with your pectorals. Anyway, gonna fold it back, wrap it 2 or 3 times over the top, clip it, do some super glue right on top of that. There's a little too much I put on there, but I have my bodkin handy, so I'm gonna spread this out, because we're really done with this fly. We're gonna do like a whip finish here or two, and then epoxy this thing in, or UV resin it in. Either one. They sell epoxy at the dollar store too, although I haven't really gotten into it for fly tying. I feel like when you use those 2 parts, you have to. I know they say they can seal them up and stuff, but I just find it's always a mess. It's like, use the whole thing. Have a couple flies all ready to go, maybe 20 or 30. Just trim up some hackles I captured with my thread wraps there. There you have it. We're almost done. This last step will even out everything and make this wing casing seem flush, and will capture more light in those dark places. So, using a thick UV resin from Loon, This is the coolest thing about the rotary vise is you can sort of like let the gravity do all the work for you. We want a nice round bubble, not too steep, not too undefined either. Like maybe I could move this to the end of the wing casing because I feel like it's lacking there. Move some up onto the threads here just to seal this shut when it does go off. And I did do it a little thin, so I'm going to let it sit and hang for a second. Let's see if I can't fix it up. That's perfect. I like it now. This is gonna work out real smooth. Make a nice round body, bending that light deep underwater, making all the fish say, ooh, ah, what's that going on? Plus you have that orange indicator bead, so you can sort of see it in the water and see if any fish creep up on it. One of my favorite flies. And I don't always tie it with the orange beads. Sometimes I use gold or tungsten black. It's all just personal preference, but this was the fly I was fishing the other day with creek chub and brook trout, and yeah, it works out. I mean, maybe the legs could be a little more like even. I know some people get real crazy in the UV process and make sure these legs are bending, but I think without the UV resin, they move plenty underwater, and the movement is what brings in the fish. It's not the actual perfect angles of the legs or the fact that there's way more than four. It's the movement that counts. Well, happy tying, happy fishing. Get outside, go and fish.